In a city where skyscrapers kissed the clouds and luxury cars lined the streets, there lived a woman named Sarah. She was an ordinary woman with simple tastes, someone who preferred comfort over extravagance. Unlike many in her neighborhood, she didn't care much for designer labels or flashy accessories. Her wardrobe consisted of practical clothes that suited her everyday life, and her idea of a perfect day involved spending time with her loved ones rather than attending high-profile events. Despite her modest lifestyle, Sarah had something truly special: a loving husband named David. David, on the other hand, was anything but ordinary. He was one of the wealthiest men in the city, a self-made billionaire who had built his empire from scratch. Starting with nothing but determination and a dream, he worked tirelessly to create a business that now spanned multiple industries. His name was well known not just locally but globally, and people often admired him for his sharp mind and relentless work ethic. But what set David apart wasn't just his wealth. It was his humility and the deep love he had for his wife. To him, Sarah wasn't just a partner. She was his anchor, the person who kept him grounded amidst the chaos of his busy life. Their marriage was a beautiful blend of contrasts. While David thrived in the world of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, Sarah found joy in quieter moments, like baking cookies or tending to their small garden. Yet, despite their differences, they shared a bond that many envied. They supported each other unconditionally, celebrating both successes and navigating challenges as a team. Their friends often joked that they were proof opposites really do attract, but anyone who knew them could see how perfectly they complemented one another. One sunny afternoon, Sarah decided to step out of her routine for a change. Her best friend's birthday was coming up, and she wanted to find something truly special to gift her. After some thought, she remembered hearing about a luxury boutique downtown. It was known for its exquisite collection of designer clothing, accessories, and jewelry, catering exclusively to the elite. Though Sarah rarely visited such places, she figured it would be worth checking out if only to find something unique for her friend. With a sense of curiosity and a little excitement, Sarah drove to the boutique. As she stepped inside, she immediately felt a shift in the atmosphere. The store was breathtakingly elegant, with crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling and plush carpets underfoot. Everything seemed to shimmer, from the polished glass display cases to the impeccably dressed mannequins standing tall in designer outfits. For a moment, Sarah paused, taking it all in. But as she began browsing through the racks, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The staff members moved around silently, gliding past customers with practiced ease. At first glance, they appeared professional, but as Sarah continued looking, she noticed subtle changes in their demeanor toward her. Some shot quick glances her way, whispering behind cupped hands. Others gave polite smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. It was clear that Sarah didn't fit the typical profile of the boutique's clientele, and unfortunately, the staff wasn't shy about letting her know. Despite the growing unease, Sarah tried to focus on her task. She spotted a beautiful silk scarf adorned with intricate patterns. It was exactly the kind of thing her friend would love. Pleased with her choice, she picked it up and walked toward the counter to pay. However, as she approached, the saleswoman stationed there looked her up and down with an expression that made Sarah's heart sink. "This isn't your kind of store," the woman said bluntly, her tone dripping with disdain. Sarah froze, unsure of how to respond. Before she could gather her thoughts, another employee chimed in, agreeing loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "I don't think we have anything here that suits you," the second voice added, causing a few heads to turn in their direction. Humiliated and hurt, Sarah clutched the scarf tightly in her hands but didn't say a word. She realized arguing wouldn't change anything, so she turned around and left the boutique as quickly as possible, tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. Driving home, Sarah replayed the incident in her mind, trying to make sense of what had happened. She wasn't angry at herself for visiting the boutique. That wasn't the issue. What bothered her most was the way she had been treated simply because she didn't look the part of a wealthy customer. She couldn't help but wonder how often others faced similar judgment based solely on appearances. By the time she reached home, her initial embarrassment had transformed into a quiet resolve. She reminded herself of who she was and what mattered most in life: kindness, authenticity, and the love of those closest to her. That evening, as Sarah sat alone in the living room reflecting on the day's events, she heard the front door open. David was home. Hearing his familiar footsteps, she debated whether or not to tell him about the incident. Part of her hesitated, fearing he might feel obligated to intervene or react strongly. But another part of her longed to share her feelings with the person she trusted most. When David entered the room, his warm smile instantly put her at ease. "Hey, sweetheart," he greeted her, noticing the slight tension in her expression. "You seem quiet tonight. Is everything okay?" His voice was gentle, filled with genuine concern. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then decided to confide in him. Slowly, she recounted the events of the afternoon: the boutique, the scarf, and the humiliating remarks from the staff. As she spoke, David listened intently, his brow furrowing with every detail. Though he remained calm outwardly, anger simmered beneath the surface. He couldn't believe anyone would treat his wife so disrespectfully, especially in a place that prided itself on exclusivity. When Sarah finished speaking, David reached out and took her hand in his. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," he said softly, squeezing her fingers reassuringly. "But don't let them make you doubt yourself. You're incredible just the way you are." His words brought a small smile to Sarah's face, though she still felt a lingering sting from the experience. Little did she know, David already had a plan forming in his mind, a plan that would ensure no one else would ever be treated the way she had been that day. As the night wore on, Sarah found comfort in David's presence. Together they talked about simpler things, allowing laughter and warmth to chase away the shadows of the afternoon. Yet, unknown to her, David's thoughts were racing ahead, plotting a course of action that would soon send shockwaves through the city and leave everyone talking about the power of standing up for what's right. The next morning, Sarah woke up feeling lighter than she had the previous night. Talking to David always had a way of calming her down, no matter how troubling the situation was. Still, she couldn't help but wonder if he'd truly let the boutique incident go or if he was secretly upset about it. David wasn't the type to show his emotions openly, especially when it came to matters involving injustice. Over the years, Sarah had learned that his quiet demeanor often masked a storm of thoughts brewing beneath the surface. True to his nature, David didn't say much about the boutique as they ate breakfast together. Instead, he focused on small talk, asking about her plans for the day and sharing a funny story from one of his meetings. But Sarah noticed something different in his behavior. He seemed more thoughtful than usual, pausing occasionally as if weighing his words carefully. When she asked him if everything was okay, he simply smiled and said, "Don't worry about it, I've got this handled." His tone was calm, almost reassuring, but it left Sarah with a sense of curiosity. What exactly did handled mean? Later, that day, while Sarah was busy catching up on some errands, David made his way downtown. Dressed casually in jeans and a simple sweater, he looked like any other passerby strolling through the city streets. However, anyone who knew him would recognize the unmistakable air of authority that surrounded him, a quiet confidence that commanded respect without demanding attention. As he approached the luxury boutique where Sarah had been treated so poorly, he took a deep breath and pushed open the glass doors. Inside, the boutique was just as opulent as Sarah had described. The chandeliers sparkled brightly overhead, casting a warm glow over the polished marble floors. Expensive perfumes wafted through the air, mingling with the faint sound of classical music playing softly in the background. Employees moved gracefully between customers, their smiles practiced and professional. At first glance, nothing seemed out of place. It was the picture of elegance and exclusivity, but David knew better. Beneath its glamorous facade, this boutique harbored a culture of elitism and prejudice that needed to be addressed. As soon as David entered, heads turned. Some recognized him immediately. Others whispered among themselves, trying to figure out who he was. It wasn't uncommon for wealthy individuals to visit such places, But David's arrival felt different somehow. Perhaps it was the determined look in his eyes or the deliberate way he scanned the room, taking in every detail. Whatever it was, the staff quickly realized that this wasn't an ordinary customer browsing for luxury items. One of the salespeople approached him cautiously, offering a polite greeting. "Good afternoon, sir," she said with a forced smile. "How may we assist you today?" Her voice was smooth, designed to charm even the most discerning clients. But David wasn't here to be charmed. Without missing a beat, he replied, "I'd like to speak with the manager. It's important." The request caught the salesperson off guard. Managers rarely interacted directly with customers unless absolutely necessary, and certainly not without prior notice. Sensing the urgency in David's tone, she nodded nervously and hurried toward the back office. Moments later, a tall man in an expensive suit emerged, his expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Mr. Carter?" he asked, extending his hand. "I'm Michael, the store manager. How can I help you?" David shook the man's hand firmly before cutting straight to the point. "Let's step into your office," he said, his voice low but firm. The manager hesitated for a split second before leading him to a private room at the rear of the store. Once inside, David closed the door behind them, ensuring their conversation wouldn't be overheard. He wasted no time getting to the heart of the matter. "Yesterday," David began, his tone steady but laced with intensity, "my wife visited your boutique. She came here looking for a gift, hoping to find something special. Instead, she was humiliated by your staff. They judged her based on her appearance and made her feel unwelcome in your store." He paused, letting his words sink in. The manager's face paled slightly, though he tried to maintain his composure. "I assure you, Mr. Carter, we hold our staff to the highest standards." David held up a hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Save the excuses," he said sharply. "This isn't about standards, it's about respect. My wife deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of what she wears or how much money she spends. And frankly, so does everyone else who walks through those doors." The manager shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly unprepared for the confrontation. "If there was a misunderstanding, I apologize," he stammered. "We'll speak to the employees involved and ensure it doesn't happen again." But David wasn't satisfied with a mere apology. Leaning forward slightly, he fixed the manager with a piercing gaze. "Do you know who I am?" he asked. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. The manager hesitated, then nodded slowly. Of course he knew. Everyone in the city knew David Carter, the billionaire entrepreneur whose name was synonymous with success. "Then you should also know," David continued, "that I own several properties in this area, including the building you're currently operating in. If I hear of another incident like this, rest assured your lease will be terminated immediately." The room fell silent. The manager stared at David, his mouth slightly agape. He hadn't expected the conversation to take such a serious turn. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, the manager cleared his throat and nodded again, this time with genuine understanding. "You have my word, Mr. Carter. We'll address this issue thoroughly and make sure it never happens again." Satisfied but still wary, David stood up and headed for the door. Before leaving, he turned back to the manager and added one final remark. "Remember, respect costs nothing, but losing it can cost you everything." With that, he exited the office, leaving the manager to process what had just transpired. Back at home, Sarah had no idea what David had done. She spent her afternoon organizing old photo albums, reminiscing about happier times. Every now and then, her thoughts drifted back to the boutique, but she pushed them aside, focusing instead on the positive memories she shared with David. He finally returned later that evening. He greeted her with a warm hug and kissed her cheek. "How was your day?" he asked casually, as if nothing unusual had happened. "It was good," Sarah replied, smiling. "Quiet but nice. What about yours?" She studied his face closely, searching for any sign of tension or frustration. To her surprise, he looked completely relaxed, almost cheerful. "Oh, you know," he said with a shrug. just tying up some loose ends. Sarah didn't press further. She trusted David implicitly and knew he would tell her anything important when the time was right. Little did she realize that his actions earlier that day were already starting to ripple outward, sparking conversations and reactions far beyond what either of them could have anticipated. By the following morning, news of David's visit to the boutique had begun to spread. Word traveled fast in a city filled with gossip and intrigue, and it wasn't long before snippets of the story reached social media. Someone posted about seeing David at the boutique, speculating about why he might have gone there. Others chimed in, piecing together details until the full narrative started to emerge. Soon enough, hashtags like Russian Respect for All and Oshk Stand with Sarah began trending online, drawing attention not only to the incident itself, but also to the broader issue of discrimination in high-end establishments. Local journalists picked up on the buzz, eager to uncover more information. Reporters called the boutique for comments, while others reached out to David's PR team for statements. The boutique's management scrambled to respond, issuing a carefully worded apology on their website. They claimed they were committed to inclusivity and promised to retrain their staff. Yet skepticism lingered among the public. Many people questioned whether the apology was sincere or merely a damage control tactic. Meanwhile, Sarah remained blissfully unaware of the growing storm surrounding her experience. She went about her day, tending to household chores and planning a small dinner party for friends. It wasn't until a neighbor mentioned something about the boutique drama that Sarah realized something unusual was happening. Confused, she asked for clarification, only to learn that her story had become the center of widespread discussion. When Sarah confronted David about it later that evening, he admitted what he had done. At first, she was stunned, not because of the action itself, but because of the magnitude of its impact. "I didn't do it for attention," David explained gently. "I did it because no one should ever treat you or anyone else that way. You deserve better, and so does everyone else." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she listened to him. She appreciated his intentions, but part of her worried about being portrayed as someone who relied on her husband's influence to solve problems. David saw the concern in her expression and reassured her. "This isn't about me or my status," he said firmly. "It's about standing up for what's right. And honestly, I think people are inspired by your strength, not mine." Indeed, public opinion seemed to reflect David's words. Social media users praised Sarah for handling the situation with grace and dignity, while applauding David for using his platform to advocate for change. Together, they became symbols of resilience and unity, a reminder that the days following David's visit to the boutique brought unexpected changes for Sarah. At first, she struggled with the attention surrounding her story. News outlets continued to cover the incident, and social media buzzed with reactions from people across the city and even beyond. Some praised her resilience, while others criticized her decision to stay quiet about the humiliation until David stepped in. Despite the mixed opinions, one thing was clear. Sarah had become an unintentional symbol of strength and grace under pressure. For Sarah, this newfound spotlight felt uncomfortable at times. She wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not on such a public scale. Her life had always been private and simple, a stark contrast to the whirlwind of discussions now swirling around her name. Friends and acquaintances reached out, some offering support and others asking intrusive questions. Strangers stopped her in grocery stores or sent messages online, sharing their own experiences of discrimination and thanking her for inspiring them to speak up. While Sarah appreciated the kind gestures, she couldn't shake the feeling that people saw her differently now, as someone defined by a single moment rather than the person she truly was. David noticed how uneasy Sarah seemed and did his best to shield her from the chaos. He turned down interview requests and instructed his PR team to limit statements to just a few carefully worded posts on social media. "Let's keep our focus on what matters," he told her one evening as they sat together on the couch. "It's not about us anymore. It's about making sure no one else has to go through what you did." His words reassured her, but deep down, Sarah knew the impact of the incident would linger for a long time. Meanwhile, the boutique faced mounting backlash. Customers who once flocked to its doors began boycotting it, accusing the store of perpetuating elitism and snobbery. Online reviews poured in, many recounting similar stories of mistreatment based on appearance or perceived wealth. The boutique's reputation, once polished and untouchable, started to crack under the weight of public scrutiny. Even loyal patrons expressed disappointment, questioning whether they wanted to associate themselves with a brand that treated people so poorly. Behind closed doors, the boutique's management scrambled to salvage their image. They held emergency meetings, hired diversity consultants, and launched campaigns aimed at promoting inclusivity. Yet skepticism remained high. Many doubted the sincerity of these efforts, viewing them as desperate attempts to win back lost business rather than genuine steps toward change. Social media hashtags like "EU boycott the boutique" gained traction, with users urging others to take their money elsewhere. For a store that thrived on exclusivity, the sudden shift in public perception was devastating. As the controversy unfolded, Sarah found herself reflecting on the bigger picture. She realized that her experience wasn't unique. Far from it. Countless individuals faced judgment and exclusion every day, often without anyone noticing or caring. What made her situation different was the fact that she had someone powerful standing beside her, ready to amplify her voice. But what about those who didn't? This thought weighed heavily on her mind, sparking a desire to do more than simply move past the incident. One afternoon, while flipping through a magazine, Sarah came across an article about organizations working to combat classism and promote equality. Intrigued, she decided to research further. Hours later, she emerged from her laptop screen with a list of nonprofits dedicated to empowering marginalized communities. Some focused on providing resources to low-income families, while others advocated for fair treatment in workplaces and public spaces. Inspired, Sarah shared her findings with David over dinner. "I've been thinking," she said hesitantly, twirling her fork in her pasta. "What if we could use this moment to make a real difference? Not just for me, but for everyone who feels judged or dismissed because of how they look or where they come from." David listened intently, nodding as she spoke. "That's a great idea," he replied, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. "We have the means to help, and honestly, I think it's exactly what we should do. Let's turn this negative experience into something positive." Together, they began brainstorming ways to contribute. David suggested using his influence to raise awareness and funds for the causes Sarah cared about. He proposed hosting a charity gala, inviting influential figures from various industries to participate. The event would not only generate financial support, but also serve as a platform to discuss issues like classism and discrimination openly. Sarah loved the idea but insisted on keeping things grounded and authentic. "Let's make sure it's about the message, not just the glitz and glamour," she said firmly. "We need to show people that change starts with action, not appearances." In the weeks leading up to the gala, Sarah threw herself into planning. She worked closely with nonprofit leaders, learning about their missions and understanding the challenges they faced. For someone who had always preferred staying behind the scenes, taking on such a visible role felt daunting, but also incredibly rewarding. Each meeting, each conversation, reinforced her belief that collective effort could drive meaningful change. Slowly but surely, she began to embrace her role as an advocate, finding strength in knowing she wasn't alone. Word of the upcoming gala spread quickly, drawing interest from all corners of the city. Tickets sold out within days, and donations poured in from businesses eager to align themselves with the cause. On the night of the event, the venue buzzed with energy. Guests mingled beneath twinkling lights, sipping champagne and admiring the elegant decor. But unlike typical galas, this one carried a deeper purpose. Speeches from activists and community leaders reminded attendees of the importance of empathy and inclusion, while heartfelt testimonials from individuals who had experienced discrimination struck a chord with everyone present. Sarah stood nervously at the podium during the final segment of the evening, preparing to deliver a speech. As she looked out at the sea of faces, she felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. So much had changed since that humiliating day at the boutique. Yet here she was, surrounded by people united in their commitment to create a better world. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "When I walked into that boutique, I never imagined my life would change the way it has," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But looking back, I realized that sometimes the hardest moments teach us the most important lessons. I learned that kindness is priceless, respect is non-negotiable, and standing up for what's right isn't always easy. But it's always worth it." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, earning a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. David watched proudly from the sidelines, marveling at how far Sarah had come. In that moment, he knew they were exactly where they were meant to be, using their platform to inspire others and make a lasting impact. By the end of the night, the gala had raised millions for the chosen charities, surpassing everyone's expectations. More importantly, it sparked conversations that extended far beyond the walls of the venue. People left inspired, vowing to challenge stereotypes and champion inclusivity in their own lives. For Sarah and David, the success of the event marked the beginning of a new chapter, one rooted in compassion, advocacy, and unwavering support for those in need. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy after the gala, though neither Sarah nor David forgot the lessons they had learned. They continued supporting the causes they cared about, attending fundraisers and volunteering their time whenever possible. Their marriage grew even stronger, built on a foundation of shared values and mutual respect. Through it all, they remained grateful, not for the wealth or fame that came with David's success, but for the opportunity to use their privileges to uplift others. And so, what had started as a painful encounter in a luxury boutique transformed into a catalyst for change. It reminded Sarah, David, and countless others that true power lies not in titles or bank accounts, but in the ability to stand together and fight for a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect. No matter how ordinary or extraordinary life may seem, there is always room to make a difference, and sometimes the simplest acts of courage can leave the most profound legacies. In the weeks following the charity gala, Sarah and David found themselves reflecting deeply on everything that had transpired. The event had been a resounding success, raising not only funds but also awareness about issues like classism and discrimination. Yet, as the initial excitement faded, they began to realize that their work was far from over. Change didn't happen overnight, and while the gala had planted seeds of hope, nurturing those seeds would require consistent effort. For Sarah, this realization brought both clarity and determination. She had always considered herself an ordinary person, someone who preferred blending into the background rather than standing in the spotlight. But the boutique incident and its aftermath forced her to step out of her comfort zone. Now she saw herself differently, not as someone defined by humility or modesty, but as someone capable of making a difference. This newfound perspective gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt before. David, too, was inspired by the journey they were on together. While he had always used his resources to support charitable causes, this time felt different. It wasn't just about writing checks or attending fundraisers. It was about using their combined voices to spark meaningful conversations. He admired Sarah's courage and resilience, qualities he believed could inspire others to take action in their own lives. Together, they became a team devoted not only to each other but also to creating a better world. One morning, as Sarah sipped her coffee at the kitchen table, she stumbled upon an article online about another woman who had faced similar treatment at a high-end store. The story resonated with her deeply. It was almost as if she were reading about her own experience all over again. What struck her most, however, was how isolated the woman seemed. Unlike Sarah, she didn't have someone, like David, to amplify her voice or hold the store accountable. Instead, she quietly endured the humiliation, doubting whether anyone would care enough to listen. Sarah shared the article with David later that day. "This keeps happening," she said, frustration evident in her tone. "It's not just one boutique or one city, it's everywhere. People are judged every single day because of how they look or what they wear. How do we stop it?" David leaned back in his chair, thoughtful. "We can't fix everything overnight," he admitted. "But maybe we can start by giving people a platform to share their stories. If more voices speak up, it becomes harder for places like that boutique to ignore the problem." The idea took root quickly. Over the next few days, Sarah and David brainstormed ways to create a space where individuals could share their experiences without fear of judgment. They envisioned a website, a safe and accessible platform where people could post anonymously, if they chose, detailing moments when they had been treated unfairly due to prejudice or bias. The goal wasn't just to expose bad behavior, but to foster understanding and empathy among readers. With David's connections and resources, setting up the website proved easier than expected. A team of developers worked tirelessly to bring the vision to life, incorporating features that allowed users to submit stories, comment on posts, and even offer solutions or advice. Sarah named the site "Every Voice Matters," emphasizing the importance of listening to perspectives often overlooked or dismissed. When the website launched a month later, it quickly gained traction, drawing visitors from across the globe. Stories poured in faster than Sarah and David had anticipated. Some recounted experiences similar to Sarah's, being turned away from stores or restaurants based on appearance. Others described more subtle forms of discrimination, like being ignored in professional settings or excluded from social circles. Each submission painted a vivid picture of the challenges people face daily, reminding Sarah and David why their efforts were so crucial. To keep the momentum going, Sarah decided to write a weekly blog post highlighting some of the stories submitted to the site. She wanted to ensure that no voice went unheard, no matter how small it might seem. Her first post focused on a young man who had been denied service at a cafe because he wore old sneakers. Though the incident seemed minor, it had left him feeling ashamed and unworthy. Sarah's heartfelt retelling of his story struck a chord with readers, prompting hundreds of comments expressing solidarity and encouragement. As the weeks went by, Sarah noticed something remarkable happening. The website wasn't just a place for sharing grievances, it was becoming a community. Strangers connected through shared experiences, offering words of support and advice. Some even organized local meetups to discuss ways to combat discrimination in their neighborhoods. Businesses began reaching out, pledging to review their policies and train staff to treat customers with greater respect. It was proof that change, though slow, was possible. Meanwhile, David continued leveraging his influence to amplify the movement. He spoke at conferences and panel discussions, urging leaders in various industries to prioritize inclusivity and equality. His speeches often referenced Sarah's story, emphasizing the power of standing up for what's right, even when it feels uncomfortable. Audiences responded enthusiastically, many vowing to implement changes within their own organizations. Despite the progress, challenges remained. Not everyone supported the initiative. Critics accused Sarah and David of exaggerating the issue or using it as a publicity stunt. Some argued that businesses had the right to cater to specific demographics, dismissing calls for inclusivity as unnecessary interference. Sarah read these comments with a mix of sadness and resolve. She knew criticism came with the territory, but it didn't diminish the importance of the work they were doing. One evening, as she scrolled through the website's submissions, Sarah came across a particularly moving story. A woman named Lisa wrote about being refused entry to a luxury hotel simply because she carried a backpack instead of an expensive handbag. The rejection had devastated her, leaving her questioning her self-worth. But then, she discovered every voice matters and realized she wasn't alone. Reading others' stories gave her strength, and she ended her post by thanking Sarah and David for creating the platform. Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes as she finished reading. She forwarded the story to David, who read it silently before pulling her into a tight embrace. "You're changing lives," he whispered. "Not just yours, but so many others." The reminder filled Sarah with renewed determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she also knew they were on the right path. Every story shared, every connection made, brought them closer to a world where respect and kindness weren't privileges reserved for a select few, but rights afforded to everyone. By the end of the year, Every Voice Matters had grown into a global movement. Schools incorporated its teachings into anti-bullying programs. Companies adopted its principles into employee training modules, and activists cited it as a model for grassroots advocacy. Through it all, Sarah and David remained steadfast in their commitment to the cause, knowing that true change required patience, persistence, and unwavering belief in the power of unity. Their journey had transformed them in ways neither could have predicted. Sarah, once hesitant to speak up, now stood confidently as a voice for the voiceless. David, ever the strategist, learned the value of leading with heart rather than just ambition. Together, they proved that even the simplest acts of courage could ignite powerful movements, and that love, when paired with action, had the power to reshape the world. As the months passed, Sarah and David's efforts began to ripple outward in ways they hadn't fully anticipated. The website, Every Voice Matters, wasn't just a platform for sharing stories anymore. It had become a beacon of hope for people around the world. What started as a small initiative sparked by Sarah's experience at the boutique had grown into something far greater, a movement that reminded individuals of their worth and encouraged them to stand up against injustice. For Sarah, managing the website became a full-time responsibility, though she didn't see it as work. Every morning she woke up eager to read the new submissions that had come in overnight. Some stories were heartbreaking, accounts of blatant discrimination or cruel treatment, but others were uplifting, filled with moments of triumph and resilience. Each one reinforced her belief that no one should face prejudice alone. She often spent hours crafting thoughtful responses to contributors, thanking them for their bravery and assuring them that their voices mattered. David, meanwhile, continued using his influence to support the cause. He partnered with corporate leaders, urging them to adopt policies promoting inclusivity and respect within their organizations. At first, some executives were hesitant, worried about how such changes might affect their bottom line. But David was persuasive, pointing out that treating customers and employees fairly wasn't just the right thing to do. It was good for business too. Over time, more companies joined the effort, revising dress codes, training staff, and making public commitments to equality. The impact of their combined efforts began showing in unexpected places. Small businesses, inspired by the movement, started implementing their own initiatives to ensure every customer felt welcome. A local cafe introduced a pay-it-forward program, allowing patrons to buy coffee for strangers who couldn't afford it. A bookstore hosted free workshops on diversity and inclusion, inviting authors from marginalized communities to speak. Even schools got involved, teaching students about empathy and the importance of standing up for others. Despite these positive developments, not everyone embraced the movement. Critics remained vocal, questioning whether Sarah and David's actions were truly altruistic or simply self-serving. Some accused them of exploiting Sarah's boutique incident for attention, while others dismissed the entire concept of inclusivity as unnecessary political correctness. These accusations stung, especially for Sarah, who had poured her heart into the project. But instead of letting negativity deter her, she used it as motivation to keep going. One particularly harsh comment stood out to her. Someone wrote online, "Why doesn't she just move on? No one cares about this anymore." Reading those words made Sarah pause. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was she fighting a losing battle? Did people really care about what she and David were trying to achieve? But then she remembered Lisa, the woman who had been turned away from the luxury hotel because of her backpack. Lisa's gratitude had been genuine, and so were countless other messages Sarah received daily. Those voices mattered more than any criticism ever could. With renewed determination, Sarah sat down at her computer and drafted a heartfelt post, addressing the backlash. "We know not everyone will agree with us," she wrote, "and that's okay. Change is uncomfortable and progress takes time. But we believe in a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, regardless of how they look or what they own. That's why we'll keep sharing stories, amplifying voices, and pushing for a better future. Because even if only one person feels less alone because of our work, it's worth it." The response to her post was overwhelming. Thousands of people shared it, praising Sarah for her honesty and courage. Many echoed her sentiment, vowing to continue supporting the movement despite its critics. The outpouring of love and solidarity reminded Sarah why she had started this journey in the first place, not for recognition, but to make a difference. Around the same time, Sarah and David received an invitation that surprised them both. A prominent human rights organization wanted to honor them at their annual award ceremony. The nomination came with a glowing description of their contributions to social justice, highlighting how they had turned a personal hardship into a global call for change. While flattered, Sarah hesitated to accept. She worried that accepting an award might shift focus away from the real heroes, the everyday people bravely sharing their stories. David understood her concerns but gently encouraged her to attend. "This isn't about us," he said. "It's about shining a light on the movement. If being recognized helps spread the message further, then we owe it to everyone who trusts us to share their voices." Reluctantly, Sarah agreed. On the night of the ceremony, she dressed simply yet elegantly, choosing comfort over glamour. As they walked onto the stage to accept the award, the room erupted in applause. Sarah felt a lump form in her throat as she looked out at the sea of faces. People of all ages, backgrounds, and walks of life had gathered to celebrate humanity's potential for kindness and understanding. In her acceptance speech, Sarah spoke candidly about her journey. "When I walked into that boutique, I never imagined it would lead me here," she said, her voice steady despite her nerves. "But I've learned that sometimes the hardest moments teach us the most important lessons. I've learned that every voice matters, not just the loudest ones, but the quiet ones too. And I've learned that when we stand together, we can create a world where everyone belongs." Her words resonated deeply with the audience, earning a standing ovation that lasted several minutes. David stood beside her, beaming with pride as tears streamed down Sarah's cheeks. In that moment, they both knew they were exactly where they were meant to be, using their platform to inspire others and drive meaningful change. The recognition brought additional opportunities. Media outlets invited Sarah and David to appear on talk shows and podcasts, eager to hear more about their mission. Schools requested that Sarah speak to students about overcoming adversity and finding strength in vulnerability. Even policymakers reached out, seeking advice on drafting legislation aimed at combating discrimination in public spaces. Through it all, Sarah remained grounded, reminding herself of the movement's core values. She insisted on keeping things authentic, avoiding flashy events or overly polished speeches. Instead, she focused on connecting with people on a personal level, sharing her story honestly and encouraging others to do the same. As the year drew to a close, Sarah and David reflected on how much had changed since that fateful day at the boutique. Their lives had transformed in ways they never could have predicted, but the essence of who they were remained unchanged. They were still the same couple who cherished quiet evenings at home, laughed over silly jokes, and supported each other through thick and thin. The difference now was that their love extended beyond themselves. It touched lives across the globe. One evening, as they sat together on the couch watching the sunset, Sarah turned to David with a soft smile. "Do you remember when I thought my life was ordinary?" she asked. "I don't feel that way anymore. Not because of anything fancy or extraordinary, but because I know we're making a difference." Together, David reached for her hand, squeezing it gently. "You've always been extraordinary, Sarah," he replied, "and I'm proud to stand beside you every step of the way." Their journey was far from over, but they faced whatever lay ahead with confidence and hope. Through challenges and triumphs alike, they proved that true power lies not in wealth or status, but in the ability to uplift others. And so, with hearts full of gratitude and a commitment to creating a kinder world, Sarah and David continued walking forward together. As the new year began, Sarah and David found themselves reflecting on the incredible journey they had been through. What started as a painful moment in a luxury boutique had evolved into something far greater, a movement that touched countless lives and inspired people to stand up against discrimination. Yet, despite all they had accomplished, they knew there was still much work to be done. True change wasn't something that happened overnight. It required patience, persistence, and unwavering dedication. For Sarah, running Every Voice Matters had become more than just a passion project. It was her purpose. Every day she woke up with a sense of responsibility, knowing that somewhere out there, someone needed to hear that their voice mattered. The website continued to grow, attracting visitors from every corner of the globe. Stories poured in daily, each one unique yet connected by a shared theme: the desire to be seen, heard, and respected. Some were tales of triumph, while others were raw accounts of pain and struggle. But no matter the tone, each submission reminded Sarah of the importance of what she was doing. David, too, remained deeply committed to the cause. He used his influence not only to amplify Sarah's efforts but also to push for systemic change. He worked closely with policymakers, offering insights and resources to help draft legislation aimed at combating discrimination in public spaces. His speeches at conferences and forums became legendary, often ending with standing ovations as he urged audiences to embrace inclusivity and empathy. Yet, despite the accolades, David never lost sight of why he was involved. It wasn't about recognition or legacy. It was about making the world a better place. One evening, as they sat together on their porch watching the stars twinkle above, Sarah turned to David with a thoughtful expression. "Do you ever wonder if we're doing enough?" she asked softly. "I mean, we've come so far, but sometimes it feels like we're just scratching the surface." David nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. "It's easy to feel overwhelmed," he admitted. "But I think the key is remembering that we can't fix everything all at once. What we're doing, giving people a platform, starting conversations, pushing for change, that's progress. And progress, no matter how small, is worth celebrating." His words reassured Sarah, but they also sparked an idea. She realized that while they couldn't solve every problem, they could continue expanding their reach in meaningful ways. Over the next few weeks, she brainstormed ideas for taking Every Voice Matters to the next level. One concept stood out: creating a podcast series where individuals could share their stories directly, unfiltered and unedited. It would give contributors a chance to speak in their own voices, adding a personal touch that written submissions couldn't capture. With David's support, Sarah launched the podcast within months. Titled Voices Unheard, it quickly gained popularity, drawing listeners eager to hear real-life experiences of resilience and courage. Each episode featured a different guest, ranging from everyday people to activists and advocates. Sarah hosted the show herself, introducing each segment with heartfelt commentary that connected the stories to the broader mission of inclusivity and respect. The response to the podcast was overwhelming. Listeners praised its authenticity, saying it made them feel less alone in their struggles. Many reached out to thank Sarah for giving marginalized voices a platform, while others shared how the stories had inspired them to take action in their own communities. Schools incorporated episodes into their curriculums, using them as tools to teach students about empathy and diversity. Even businesses tuned in, encouraging employees to reflect on the importance of treating everyone fairly. Meanwhile, David focused on another initiative close to his heart: mentoring young entrepreneurs from underrepresented backgrounds. He believed that economic empowerment was a crucial step toward breaking cycles of inequality. Through workshops, networking events, and financial grants, he helped aspiring business owners turn their dreams into reality. Many of these mentees went on to create companies rooted in values of inclusivity and social responsibility, further amplifying the impact of Sarah and David's work. Despite their busy schedules, Sarah and David made sure to prioritize their relationship. They understood that their partnership was the foundation of everything they achieved together. Whether it was enjoying quiet dinners at home or taking long walks in the park, they cherished the moments that allowed them to reconnect and recharge. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day, fueled by mutual respect, trust, and a shared commitment to their mission. As the months rolled by, the movement continued to gain momentum. Cities around the world began organizing events inspired by Every Voice Matters, bringing communities together to celebrate diversity, and advocate for equality. From art exhibits showcasing untold stories to charity drives supporting marginalized groups, the ripple effect of Sarah and David's efforts was undeniable. People who had once felt invisible now stood tall, empowered by the knowledge that their voices carried weight. Yet, amid all the success, Sarah and David remained humble. They never sought credit for the changes happening around them. Knowing that true progress belonged to everyone who contributed, they saw themselves not as leaders but as facilitators, people fortunate enough to have the means and opportunity to make a difference. One particularly memorable event took place on the anniversary of the boutique incident. A local community center hosted a gathering called A Night of Voices, inviting individuals to share their stories live on stage. Sarah and David attended, sitting quietly in the audience as speaker after speaker took the mic. Some spoke with trembling voices, their vulnerability palpable. Others delivered powerful monologues that brought the crowd to tears. By the end of the night, the room buzzed with energy, filled with a sense of unity and hope. Afterward, a young woman approached Sarah and David, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you for everything you've done," she said. "Your story gave me the courage to speak up when I thought no one would listen." Sarah hugged her tightly, feeling a surge of emotion. "You don't need to thank us," she replied. "This movement belongs to everyone who shares their truth. We're just here to support you." As the evening drew to a close, Sarah and David walked hand in hand back to their car. Neither spoke, but both felt the same deep sense of fulfillment. They had set out to create a world where kindness triumphed over judgment, and though challenges remained, they could see glimpses of that vision coming to life. In the years that followed, Sarah and David continued their work, always finding new ways to inspire and uplift others. They faced obstacles along the way, as anyone striving for change inevitably does. But they faced them together, leaning on each other for strength and guidance. Their marriage became a testament to the power of partnership, not just in love, but in purpose. Through it all, they held on to the lessons they had learned, that true wealth isn't measured in money or possessions, but in the ability to make a positive impact. That simplicity and authenticity are strengths, not weaknesses, and that even the most ordinary moments can spark extraordinary transformations. By the time they reached their golden years, Sarah and David looked back on their lives with pride, not because of the awards or recognition they received, but because they had stayed true to their values. They had built a legacy rooted in love, compassion, and unwavering belief in humanity's potential for good. And so, their story serves as a reminder to us all that no act of kindness is too small, no voice too insignificant, and no dream too big. In a world often divided by differences, Sarah and David proved that unity is possible, and that when we stand together, we can create a brighter, more inclusive future for everyone.